off at our number 10 spot, we have AUSTRALOPITHECUS ANAMENSIS. Back in 1965, a research team led by Brian Patterson found a single arm bone of an early human at a site which was located in northern Kenya. This was an amazing find, but without additional human fossils, they were unable to identify exactly which species it belonged to. Skip to 1994 and another research team at the same site were able to find numerous teeth and bone fragments, and through these additional samples they were able to determine that these were fossils of a very primitive hominin, and they were able to name a new species. This species had a combination of traits that can be found in both apes as well as humans. The upper end of the tibia or the shin bone shows us signs that it is likely that this species was able to walk on 2 feet. Because of the long forearms and certain features that were found in the wrist bones, it is also suggested that this species likely climbed trees as well. Based on their jaws and teeth, we think that they were likely plant eaters in general, and that their diet mostly consisted of fruits and nuts. In our number 9 spot today, we have AUSTRALOPITHECUS AFARENSIS. I actually had never learned of this species before researching for this video, but it turns out that this is one of the longest lived and best known early human species, as researchers have been able to uncover the remains of more than 300 individuals. It is said that this species was first seen somewhere between 3.85 and 2.95 million years ago, and that they survived for an impressive 900,000 years, which is 4 times longer than we as Homo sapiens have been around. More similar to chimpanzees than modern humans, the children of this species grew quite rapidly after birth, and they reached adulthood faster than we do, which means that they likely had less time for parental guidance and socialization. This species had both human and ape-like characteristics. They had more ape-like face proportions and a brain case for a brain 1/3 the size of a modern human brain. They had long, strong arms and curved fingers, which showed that they must have climbed trees. This ability to live both on the ground and in trees is likely what helped them to survive for almost a million years through climate and environmental changes. In our number 8 spot today, we have Kenyanthropus platyops. Sorry, I don't speak Latin. This is one of the more mysterious early human species, as there is still so much we don't know about them. What we do know is that they lived in Kenya about 3.5 million years ago, and that they lived at the same time as AUSTRALOPITHECUS afarensis we just talked about. Despite them living at the same time, however, this species had smaller molars, which researchers believe reflects a different diet. This means that these two species likely did not have to compete for food. There are some people who believe that us as Homo sapiens are related to this species because of their facial features that are more similar to modern humans compared to the faces of other human species that existed at the time. Not everyone in the scientific community is convinced yet, but hopefully once more specimens and fossils are found, we will be able to get a solid answer. This species remains the only one in their genus, with their name translating to flat-faced from Kenya. In our number 7 spot today, we have AUSTRALOPITHECUS africanus. This is a species of early human that does have similarity to others on this list, with a mix of human and ape-like features. Compared to some of the others, however, this species had a rounder cranium that held a larger brain, and they also had smaller teeth. The remains found of this species signify that they did walk on 2 legs, but their arms and hands show that they were also still climbing at this time in the evolution of humans. This species had males that grew to be about 4 feet and 6 inches, while the females grew to be about 3 feet 9 inches. For a while, it was believed that this might be one of the first human species that hunted animals because of the fact that many of the remains were found among broken animal bones, teeth, and horns. But it was later realized that both these animals and this early human species were just victims of the same predators: lions, leopards, and hyenas. It is now believed that the diet of this species was similar to that of chimpanzees, with fruits, plants, nuts and seeds, roots, insects, and eggs being their main source of food. In our number 6 spot today, we have Paranthropus aethiopicus. In 1967, the existence of this species was first proposed by a team of French paleontologists who had discovered a toothless mandible that was thought to differ from the other early human species that were known at the time. Many people kind of brushed it off to the side because of the fact that it seemed a little too early to name an entirely different species based on one incomplete mandible. Flash forward to 1985, however, and we have the discovery of what is known as the Black Skull. Found just west of Lake Turkana in Kenya, this skull confirmed what those who discovered that jawbone had thought. This skull had a dark color to it from the minerals in the soil that were absorbed by the skull as it fossilized, and it was able to show a species that had a mix of both derived and primitive traits. This is when we confirmed the past existence of this new species, dating back to at least 2.5 million years ago in Eastern Africa. In our number 5 spot today, we have AUSTRALOPITHECUS AUSTRALOPITHECUS gari. With a name that translates to surprise, this species definitely wasn't one that researchers expected to find. This is quite a mysterious species, with much of what they and their lives were like remaining hidden in the past, but what we do know is that this might have been one of the first human species to use stone tools. And it doesn't stop there. While fossils of this species are associated with or were found with some of the earliest known stone tools, they were also found along with animal bones that were cut and broken open with the tools. This may mean that this species was also among the first to have a diet that included meat and bone marrow from large animals. That is a huge moment in terms of human history. I mean, it likely changed the development of humans as a whole. This species is believed to have lived about 2.5 million years ago, and some experts believe that they may be an ancestor of ours. In our number 4 spot today, we have Paranthropus boisei. This is a species that is said to have lived somewhere around 2.3 to 1.2 million years ago. Like others in this genus, they are said to be characterized by a special skull that was adapted for more heavy chewing. This adaptation is seen in the appearance of this species, as they had much wider faces and molars and premolars that are about 4 times the size of modern humans. They also had the thickest dental enamel of any known early human, which I guess is a fun fact you can use the next time somebody asks you. Because of their appearance and these features, researchers speculate that this species had a bit of a rough diet. Experts believe that while when they could, they likely ate many fruits and plants, when they had to, they also had the ability to resort to tough roots and nuts. While this species lived for quite some time on this planet and coexisted with other early human species, most experts agree that they are not in the ancestral line that led to us modern humans. In our number 3 spot today, we have Australopithecus SEDIBA. This species is an important one when it comes to us because some suggest that looking at the remains and fossils we have of them may just give us valuable insight into the origins and the ancestor of the genus Homo, which is what we are. We don't really know our family tree, so to speak, all the way from the first early human species, so this might just give us some clues that can help figure it out. Said to have lived between 1.97 and 1.98 million years ago, this species has traits that are similar to some of the other earlier human species we talked about, but also some traits that are more similar to us. Remains of this species show us that it is likely that walking on 2 feet was probably their most usual form of movement. This was mostly seen in changes to the pelvis, which shows us that this is one of the first things that really changed when it came to early humans evolving these more modern traits. What is peculiar, however, is that there is also evidence that this species walked in a completely different way than any other species before it. It is said that they walked on 2 feet, but each step they had their foot turned inward with the weight focused on the outer edge of their foot. This shows us that it might be likely that the way we walk evolved through a bunch of different paths, which is kinda cool. In our number 2 spot today, we have Paranthropus robustus. Back in 1938, scientist Robert Broom bought a fossil jaw fragment and molar that was said to belong to a previously known early human species. When he examined these specimens, however, he felt as though they were different from any of the other he had seen in his career. This led to him taking a trip to South Africa to explore the site they were said to have come from. Here, he collected many more bones and teeth, and he was able to discover this previously unknown species with a name that translates to beside man. Said to have lived 1.8 to 1.2 million years ago, this species still remains much of a mystery. Scientists still aren't exactly sure which other human species this one evolved from, but what we do know about them is one of their practices that they had with the use of bone tools. With these tools, there has been evidence found that this species liked to dig into termite mounds. Researchers are trying to find out if this practice was more regional or if it was shared across the entire species. In our number 1 spot today, we have Homo heidelbergensis. In 1908 in Germany, a workman discovered a jawbone that was nearly complete with the exception of the missing premolars and the first 2 left molars. With more examination, it was realized that this was the discovery of an entirely new species. This early human species had a very large brow ridge and a large brain case. They also had a flatter face than other early human species, but perhaps the most interesting thing about them is that they are the first known human species to live live in a colder climate. This species is said to have had short, wide bodies that were likely an evolutionary adaptation to conserve heat. Dated back to about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago, this species lived at the time that we know as the earliest example of when human species were able to control fire, as well as the earliest known use of wooden spears. This is also said to have been the first known human species to routinely hunt large animals. Another remarkable feat of this species is that they were the first to build shelters, as they created little dwellings made from wood and rock. It is unclear exactly how they used these dwellings, but they changed the course of history with this new ground. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Homo habilis. Alright, starting off this list, we have the Homo habilis, which is said to translate to meaning handyman. This is a species of humans that evolved in Africa sometime prior to 2 million years ago, so clearly quite some time ago. It is believed that Homo habilis went extinct about 1.5 million years ago. By the middle of the 20th century, it was starting to be accepted that humans first evolved in Africa from an early group of hominins known as Australopiths. Back in 1960, however, a research team in Tanzania found fossils that would sort of confirm this in a way. This fossil was one that sort of fell in the gap between Australopiths and humans as we know them. It was the discovery of Homo habilis, the first true human species to evolve. From what has been found, which is mostly fragmentary fossils, it has been determined that H. habilis seemed to have a brain that was significantly larger than Australopiths and more similar to later human species. It is believed that H. habilis behaved in a human way, like they made stone tools, which at the time was thought to be different than their previous ancestors. This is exactly part of the reason they were named handyman, but at this point in time we now know that Australopiths also made tools, but the name of H. habilis still stands, and they are very important in the course of our evolution. In our number 9 spot today, we have Homo antecessor. The discovery of this species starts out at a huge archaeological site in Spain called the Gran Dolina Cave. This cave has a rich history, but as relates to this list, at this site there has been found the remains of a hominin group called Homo antecessor. This discovery came in 1997, and this species is often described as having a mix of modern and quote primitive traits. It was thought that there were similarities with this species between both other species like Neanderthals, but also with Homo sapiens. This was able to be confirmed through DNA sequencing, or really a study of ancient proteins that were extracted from dental enamel of one of the fossils. They were also able to prove that this species was a closely related or sister lineage to modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, which shows that they all must have shared some common ancestor. In our number 8 spot today, we have Homo naledi. Also called the Star Man, this species certainly was an interesting one, as they had quite an unusual mix of features. It is said that parts of their skeletons would be indistinguishable from modern humans, but there were other parts that seemed almost quote ape-like. This species also had a brain that was only slightly larger than a chimpanzee, but they were still capable of sophisticated and more modern human-like behavior. No one is exactly sure when these guys existed or when exactly they went extinct, and it isn't quite clear where they sit in the evolutionary tree, but some experts believed that they may have lived at the same time as H. habilis we already talked about. They believed that they probably went extinct more than 1 million years ago after being outcompeted by later species like H. erectus. There are others who don't agree with this, however, and who believed that this species lived much more recently, but then that begs the question as to how humans who looked so primitive could have survived until so recently. In our number 7 spot today, we have Homo erectus. As I just mentioned in the last point, we have Homo erectus, or the upright man. It is thought that this human species also evolved in Africa, this time somewhere around 2 million years ago, and they went on to quickly expand and spread throughout Eurasia. At this point in time, it is debated exactly when this species went extinct, but it is believed to be around 143,000 years ago. While this species isn't the most well known, they are extremely important to our evolution. They looked like and behaved in similar ways to us, and they were the earliest known human species to have migrated long distances, which is not only an exceptional feat, but also really important to our world today. It is believed that this might be the earliest known species who was able to learn how to control fire, and also quite possibly the first to cook their foods. This opened the way for a better diet with improved nutrition, which then paved the way for the evolution of a larger and more demanding brain. In our number 6 spot today, we have Homo neanderthalensis. We are talking about the most well-known extinct human species now, the Neanderthals. How well known they are might be contributed to the fact that they were the first ancient human species to be discovered by scientists around 200 years ago. Neanderthals were thought to have first appeared in Eurasia about 200,000 years ago, and they lived until somewhere around 40,000 years ago. It is often said that Neanderthals are like a cousin of us Homo sapiens, and that we share some sort of similar parent species with them. Despite these similarities, it isn't exactly clear when the split from the line happened between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, but some believe it may have been over 1 million years ago. Neanderthals are known for their sophisticated tools made from stone and bones, and it is thought that they might have taken advantage of fires that were caused by lightning, which showed that they were, of course, also able to control fire. It is thought that Neanderthals also practiced self-medication and that they made art, which only suggests that they might have been more cognitively advanced than people once believed. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Homo longi. This species is one of the most recently proposed hominin species, and they are thought to have originated in China. The skull that led to the discovery of this species was first found in the 1930s, but it wasn't until recently that it was made available for scientific study and analysis. The skull is thought to have come from about 146,000 years ago, and with this new information, it is thought that this skull might have brought forward a quote long-lost sister lineage of Homo sapiens. The eye sockets of this skull are said to be large and blocky, the molars are much larger than ours would be, and the brow ridge is said to be quite sizable. These are all considered primitive traits, but what's not primitive is the size of the brain, which is completely comparable to modern humans. This discovery is one that just reminds us how difficult it is to designate a new species with such limited resources available in terms of evidence. At this point in time, it isn't exactly clear where they fit in on the evolutionary tree, but it certainly is quite interesting, and it reminds us how complicated human evolution really is. In our number 4 spot today, we have Homo rudolfensis. So this is a species that has very little evidence. Really just a single specimen. A skull. This specimen, also referred to as KNMER1470, is believed to have come from about 1.9 million years ago, and it was found in what was once known as Kubifora, but it is now Kenya. The skull was originally thought to be from the species H. habilis, the one we started this list with, but there were a few problems with this classification. Firstly, the brain case of the skull was quite big. H. habilis had brains around 500 cubic centimeters, but this brain case would have allowed for a brain the size of 700 cubic centimeters. This skull also had large teeth and a smaller brow ridge than what would have been seen on the skull of an H. habilis. This is exactly why experts concluded that this skull belonged to a previously unknown species, even accounting for the differences that might have been seen between males and females. That is exactly why this separate species was designated back in 1986. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Denisovans. So this is a group that was discovered in a completely different way than the other species on this list. For most of the other species, we found fossils or remains that showed their distinct differences from other species, and these discoveries gave us very valuable insights into what their lives might have been like and around when they lived, but the discovery of these guys, we have little to no information on their skeletons, their appearance, or how they behaved, but we still know of their existence, and that's all thanks to DNA and genetics information. So basically, researchers found fragments of teeth and bones that were 50,000 years old in a cave in Siberia. Based on their age and the location they were found, everyone just assumed that the DNA extracted from them would match Neanderthals, but that did not happen. Instead, when they were tested in 2010, it was discovered that these bones belonged to a human species that is estimated to have last shared an ancestor with Neanderthals about 765,000 years ago. Right now, this species hasn't been given a scientific name, and this reluctance is due to the fact that so little is known about them. Through more research though, which is of course currently ongoing, it is thought that they might be formally recognized as a species or subspecies Homo denisova. In our number 2 spot today, we have Homo floresiensis. This species is honestly a bit of an evolutionary mystery or puzzle that is super interesting. It is believed that they lived on the Indonesian island of Flores sometime between 100,000 to 50,000 years ago, but it is also believed that ancestors of this species might have been present on the island at least 700,000 years ago. The puzzling part comes in when we talk about their appearance because it's just so different from ours. They wouldn't have stood over 3 feet tall, they had short bodies, super long feet, and a very small brain. This wouldn't have been all that strange when it came to the earliest human species like H. habilis when that species was wandering around Africa over 2 million years ago, but we are talking about a species that lives thousands of kilometers away and that was only alive 50,000 years ago. They're also thought to have behaved in a similar way to other early humans, like with the ability to control fire, cook food, that sort of thing. That is exactly why experts aren't quite sure how H. floresiensis fits into the evolutionary tree, but it is possible that they might have found themselves stranded on this island, and that is the cause for their hugely different evolutionary path. In our number 1 spot today we have Homo luzonensis. Another island-dwelling population, this species was discovered on the island of Luzon in the Philippines, and it is thought that they lived there around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago. This species was discovered through just 13 bones from teeth, fingers, toes, and a femur that were found on the island. These remains belonged to 3 different individuals, but they gave us an incredibly valuable insight into this previously unknown species. In 2019, it was determined that these bones were different enough from the other known past human species that they were then classified into their own new species category. It is crazy to think that it's still so recently that we are discovering brand new species that are so important to the history of humans and how we got here today. It is said that the toe and finger bones of this species are quite interesting as they are slightly curved, which is a feature that is shared by living species of tree-dwelling primates. It is thought that this may suggest that for H. luzonensis, living in trees might have still been a part of their lifestyle.
Kicking off the list at number 10, a ghost ship. Sometimes you find Lego washed up on a beach, like in our last couple of videos we talked about some fun things washed ashore, but sometimes you find 8 skeletons. Yeah, you heard me. Back in 2017, 8 bodies, all skeletons at this point, were found in a small wooden ship after it washed ashore in the Sea of Japan. This happened about 70 kilometers from a marina. The same marina the police found 8 men from North Korea. They were fishermen whose boat stopped working. Kinda weird, right? 8 skeletons found in a boat at the same time as 8 fishermen getting stranded. Pretty horrific sight to see walking along the beach as well. Could you imagine finding that? To dive deeper into this story, experts believe North Korea's food shortages could have been the cause behind a series of North Korean ships in the area. See, fishermen were forced to venture far out for food at this point, ill-equipped. This resulted in over 200 vessels being found across Japan's west coast. Some were found completely abandoned, others were sadly found like this ghost ship. Number 9, a motorcycle. After the 2011 tsunami in Japan, many belongings of course were lost to the deep sea. The powerful massive waves that ripped through once pushed a Harley-Davidson all the way to British Columbia's west coast, all the way over here to Canada. It was the first piece of tsunami debris to wash up on Canada's shore. The motorcycle was Japanese registered and it was inside a styrofoam lined container. That was the secret to its long commute. Come April 18th, 2012, its journey had been completed, and the container was found by a man named Peter Mark while he was four-wheeling on Graham Island Beach. The back door of the container was missing and then a motorcycle wheel was just popping out, so obviously he took a closer look. My dumbass probably would have tried to start it. Missing a tire and covered in barnacles. I'm like, maybe. Number 8, the YONAGUNI Monument. Hold your breath for this next one because we're deep diving. Because we're diving deep. We're deep diving deep. Back in 1987, a diver off the coast of Japan's Ryukyu Islands discovered these odd-shaped rocks 25 meters below the surface of the water. He found these steps almost. It looked like an underwater pyramid. There's like these clear carvings. What exactly is this? It catches the eye. It's nicknamed Japan's Atlantis. The YONAGUNI Monument is 50 meters by 20 meters. It's about 10,000 years old. Many believe this is the location of an ancient city lost to the sea over thousands of years, while others believe it's natural erosion to blame. 90-degree angles are hard to argue sometimes. Like cubic pyrite crystals, they have natural angles. In this case, it looks man-made. So what do you guys think? Man-made ancient city or some rocks? Sound off in the comments. Number 7, round schoolhouse ruins. Okay, we're getting spooky now, so turn your screen brightness up for this one. The round schoolhouse ruins is in a town called Babai. It was built in 1906 but abandoned in 1974. With most of the furniture still left over after the school closed, it's a pretty grim sight just off the bat. It's in the middle of the woods, there's desks all over the place, the ceiling is covered in mold, it's dripping, and the windows are busted. It's not pleasant. So of course, people go inside at night with flashlights to explore and get spooky or whatnot. As I'm saying this, you're probably like, where are these you freak. Tales quickly began to spread about the school because everybody who left there after exploring were traumatized. People heard voices while they were in there, doors would slam, it was in the middle of the woods and these dark shadowy figures would surround the building, apparently. Who would ever explore an abandoned school in the middle of the night in the middle of the woods? Not me, not this guy, no thanks. And hopefully not you. Be safe, wear glow sticks, and just stick to the neighborhoods when you go on your walks. Ghost hunters have called the site an interdimensional portal. Damn, student loans must be pretty insane if that's the case. Number 6, Mount Osore. Translating to Mount Fear, which reminds me of Ocarina of Time right off the bat, this area is known as the entrance to the afterlife, so buckle up if you're a believer. This mountain range features all the geographical elements that are similar to the Japanese Buddhist descriptions of paradise and hell. There's 8 symbolic mountaintops, and again, I'm getting some serious Zelda vibes here, 8 specifically, it's like, okay. There's a lake also with acidic water that only one species of fish can survive in. Okay, so now we're talking about an acid lake. This is definitely, is this real? On top of that, there's pits full of vipers. I'm gonna throw up. There also lies a river that's known as the border between Earth and Hell. So you better bring some goggles. You might be swimming with Satan by accident. Along this river, you'll find statues and offerings, gifts to the other side, and they're intended to help the past souls find their way during this journey to the afterlife. You wouldn't want to get lost being so close to the underworld and all. Every year from July 22nd to the 24th, those wanting to communicate with the dead must travel to the temple at this mountain range in order to communicate with spiritual mediums called the Itako. So if the Ouija board isn't cutting it, pack your bags and head to Japan. Number 5, the Whispering Tunnel. Inukane Pass Tunnel, aka the Whispering Tunnel. Okay, this one's scary. Of course, I had to mention this one. It's pretty popular already, and if you don't know, now you're about to. The tunnel is apparently so haunted by the ghost of a young girl. It's always a young girl, always. Rumor has it, if you enter this tunnel, one of the most haunted places in Japan, I'll say again, you'll hear, you guessed it, her whispering voice. You'll hear the whispers of her spirit telling you to stop or to turn back. Be honest, would any of you actually turn back after actually hearing something if you went to this tunnel purposely? Those who dared enter this tunnel reported a poking feeling, like something was almost shoving them or trying to move them. That's pretty creepy. Also, I'm on my way. Number 4, a new species. It's not every day you discover an entirely new species in a parking lot, but here we are. Back in 2018, a new type of tardigrade was found. A little tiny microscopic little water bear. The species, called Macrobiotis shanaicus, is the 168th tardigrade discovered in Japan. Nice. There are these water bears found in moss and soil. This new species was found around somebody's apartment. How casual is that? If you're into plants, check them when you get home. The venom symbiote may be lurking in the soil. To the naked eye, these things really don't exist. They're tiny little creatures, but up close through a microscope, they're horrifying. They're caterpillar-looking creatures with 3 rows of teeth, like circle rows of teeth. They look like sandworms from the movie Dune. So if you've seen that recently, that's all around you right now. You may have just breathed one in. I definitely just did. Number 3, fake news. Shinichi Fujimura. Okay, so back in 1981, they discovered stonework that dated back to 40,000 years ago. This was a huge deal, of course. His name was everywhere. Students were going on field trips to these sites that he uncovered. He visited like 150 sites in total and just found these rocks. This guy rose to fame, and come 1999, he had his work laid out on display in national historical sites. But when 2000 rolled around, his life changed. Did he discover new stones? No, someone discovered his bull. He was caught on tape positioning fake artifacts at these sites. 61 fake artifacts were being used. He would use the same ones over and over again in different locations. This guy would go and bury them and then leave and then come back as if it was the first time he was there with a crew. He's like, oh, I think there's something over here. What? No way. Let's be rich. Not a bad plan, honestly. Out of 31 pieces found at the historical Kamita-Kamarori site, 27 were fake. He really rocked the world with that one. This is why you always dig a little deeper. We really uncovered the truth in that one. I have like 15 more. Number 2, a new predator. Okay, so we talked about those tiny water bears and how a new species was discovered, but how about a new apex predator? Yep, here we go. A new deep sea fish was discovered back in 2016. Marine biologist Yoshira Fujiwara found it off the coast of central Japan. They referred to the fish as a living fossil because it looks disgusting. It's an absolute nightmare. Look at those teeth. It's just, no, all no thanks. The yokozuna is at the top of its food chain. They're strong swimmers and they have a big mouth. One bite and this thing can gulp Nemo and his dad. Done, instantly. Movie over so fast. They're over 1 meter long. How it wasn't discovered sooner, I have no idea, honestly. The term yokozuna is a reference to a professional sumo wrestler's top rank. So compare that to something like, a clownfish. It's game over, you're done. Fish scare me. I'm so terrified. Let's move on. Number 1, giant centipede. Okay, gotta save the best for last, right? Honestly, I hate centipedes. They're like spiders and snakes mashed up into one. It's a big no from me. This giant centipede was recently discovered in Japan, attacking prawns. What a scene. Some would say that's out of a horror film. It measures up at around 8 inches long and 1 inch wide. So not only will you feel it crawl on you, you should definitely see it coming too. And it's fast as shit. It's a beast. It's the first centipede to be discovered in Japan in 150 years. Impressive, yes. Horrifying, also yes. I'm itchy just talking about this thing right now. Japanese biologists arrived at the scene after hearing about this creature attacking rat-sized freshwater prawns. If somebody texted me that, I would sprint over. With a stick, of course.
Number 10, the dodo. In the words of my roommate, dodo. Classic. Perhaps one of the most infamous extinctions known to man was that of the dodo bird. When humans met the dodo bird, they were literally eaten to death within 80 years, I think, of their discovery. They were easy to catch, and as their name suggests, they weren't the smartest. But guys, there are some really exciting things happening in the world of genetics, and finally, scientists are on the way to bringing them back. After collecting various DNA samples, in January 2016, the University of California announced they have completed the genome sequence of the dodo bird, opening a variety of doors. With this new information, scientists may be able to recover enough DNA to create a clone to implant in the eggs of the closely related modern pigeon. Number 9, the thylacine. The story of the last known thylacine or Tasmanian tiger is very sad. His name was Benjamin, and after thousands of his species were eradicated for fear that they'd eat Australia's cattle, he was the last one left. He was a resident in the Beaumaris Zoo in Hobart for a while, until one night, out of neglect, they didn't let him back into the kennel. He died of exposure, and his body was thrown into a dump. So sad. But Michael Archer believes we owe it to Benjamin to bring him back. There is one surviving sample of the thylacine that was pickled in alcohol. Unfortunately, some of the samples were contaminated by careless human DNA, so people reaching in going, ooh, look, it's so weird, and then dropping it back in. But the teeth contained viable samples. In fact, they were able to splice the thylacine cells successfully with a mouse. Archer even argues that should we be able to bring them back, that they could thrive in the Tasmanian ecosystem still, as not much has changed. As we will discover on this list, there's a lot we can do now when it comes to cloning, so it is only a matter of time before we see them again. Number 8, aurochs. You may have never heard of aurochs, but they are one of the most important creatures to have ever walked this earth. They are the great-great-grandparents of all living cattle today, so I guess you better thank them for the burger you're barbecuing. Aurochs used to roam all across Europe and were responsible for managing biodiversity through grazing. However, this species was hunted to extinction in 1627, but its DNA still lives on. The Toros program aims to bring back the aurochs as a functional wild animal by backbreeding its closest relatives. It may not be exactly the same, but they hope to genetically breed this cattle to the point that it resembles as closely as possible the original aurochs, kind of like a modern day equivalent. Number 7, the ground sloth. Somebody warn Kristen Bell because I don't know if she will actually be able to handle this. The ground sloth was a massive version of the sloths we know now that existed around 8,000 years ago. Imagine a sloth combined with a giant bear. So nice. They make the de-extinction list only because we do have DNA samples that have been extracted from a preserved strand of hair, so it could be done. The biggest problem preventing this, however, is the fact that no surviving relatives are large enough to give birth to it. But what scientists may be able to do is grow one in an artificial womb, which scientists in the Netherlands say they are within 10 years of perfecting. Number 6, the STELLER'S sea cow. When I say sea cow, you might imagine the slow and lovable manatee, and you're not entirely wrong. They kind of look like a cross between a manatee and a sea lion. The STELLER'S sea cow is an extinct Sirenian marine mammal, which is in the same order as the manatee. It used to live in the North Pacific Ocean during the Pleistocene and Holocene epoch and was last discovered in 1741 by the Vitus Bering's Great Northern Expedition, but disappeared by the end of the 18th century. Scientists estimate that climate changes as well as Paleolithic human hunting may have been the reason the numbers were already so low even before Europeans made the last strike. Like some others on this list, however, scientists were able to sequence the genome, which could mean we may see these creatures again one day. Number 5, elephant shrew. It may surprise you to know that though a lot of big awful things might have happened, some good did come out of 2020. The elephant shrew is just one tiny but apparently mighty example. For just over 50 years, not a single elephant shrew had been spotted, which led scientists to believe that sadly this little long-nosed mouse was a lost species. Since the 1970s, any information derived from the species was found through examinations of historic specimens. But in August 2020, a team of researchers and academics reported the opposite, that they were indeed alive and apparently well. Somehow, these little creatures were able to rebuild their numbers and are now thriving across the Horn of Africa once again. Number 4, the woolly mammoth. Since the film Ice Age came out, I'm sure a lot of us can't picture the animal without imagining like Ray Romano's voice along with it, because that's what we do. But eventually, we may not have to use only our imaginations to see real-life woolly mammoths. Mammoths preserved in the permafrost in Siberia have given paleogeneticists enough data that they have been able to sequence the woolly mammoth genome, which we already know is super important. With this data, they may be able to clone the creature or edit the genetic material to its closest living relative, the Asian elephant. But it gets even cooler than that. In 2019, scientists from Japan and Russia announced a significant step towards this goal. They were able to bring cells of the woolly mammoth back to life. They were able to recover cells from the hind leg of a juvenile mammoth they found in Siberia that was uncovered in 2011. They successfully implanted 28,000-year-old cell nuclei into mouse cells. So though we may be very far off from actually seeing a mammoth, the kind of technology that's being developed here is astounding. Like, it's so cool. Scientists hope that they can use this technology to help prevent whole species from disappearing forever. Bringing back the woolly mammoth has a lot of scientific and ethical boundaries that need to be addressed. For instance, they're social creatures. You'd need to bring back a whole herd. How would you introduce them back into the wild? Yada, yada, yada. But how cool is it that extinction in the future may rarely happen again if we can master this technology? Number 3, the gastric brooding frog. The cooler name of this amphibian is the ROBUSTUS, which were a kind of ground-dwelling frog native to Queensland, Australia. It was one of 2 known frog species that was capable, of incubating their offspring within their stomach of the mother. She would swallow her own eggs, her stomach would stop making hydrochloric acid to avoid digestion, and transform her stomach into a womb, essentially. When the anywhere from 20 to 25 tadpoles hatched, the mucus from their gills kept the acid at bay, which was super exciting for scientists because then they could figure out how to do that in humans if they were able to study them. But unfortunately, these frogs disappeared almost as soon as they were discovered. Unfortunately, both species of this weird and wonderful genus became extinct around the mid-1980s, but the scientists, a part of the appropriately named Lazarus Project, planned to bring it back to life. Previous cell samples of this species collected prior to the 1970s have been preserved for 40 years in a conventional freezer. In 2013, Professor Mike Archer and his colleagues announced they were able to successfully grow early-stage cloned embryos containing DNA from the gastric brooding frog. Though it's taking longer than a couple years, the Lazarus Project is still on track to bring this unique creature back to life. But it's also important to note that frogs across the world are dying from the deadly chytrid fungus, and this technology could save them all. Number 2, the quagga. So they actually have brought this back, kind of. The quagga was a type of zebra that used to roam South Africa in herds before European settlers killed them all. But now scientists in Cape Town figured out how to bring them back. Quaggas had stripes very similar to zebras, but they only appeared on the front half of their bodies and are brown along the rear. Eric Harley, the project's leader, discovered that the key to bringing back this animal was through genetics, of course, as we know now. By testing quagga skins, they discovered that they were actually a subspecies of the zebras we know and love. Therefore, it could be possible to manifest the genes through selective breeding, and they were right. They are now in the 5th generation of the breeding process, and already there are less and less stripes and the appearance of a brown color. The next step would be to see if they can exact the pattern and behavioral differences between the quagga and zebras, not just the coloring. So they still got a long way to go, but really cool. Number 1, the PYRENEAN IBEX. So technically, this is the only species to ever go extinct twice. The Pyrenean ibex, or Picardo, became extinct back in 2000 when a fallen tree fell on the last female Celia. Sad way to go. But scientists were quick to freeze some of the cells in liquid nitrogen. With these cells, they were able to clone a calf in 2003 that was brought to life for only a few minutes before it died. Despite the loss, it was a historic event in history and the first de-extinction. Now they still plan to use the 14-year-old cells of Celia, but first they must see if they are still alive. In addition to this, they are also attempting to clone embryos and implant them in female ghosts. So, they did it once. Who is to say they won't be able to do it again? But maybe with bigger prey. Now, some of the questions that accompany and often oppose de-extinction is, if we do bring them back, where will we put them? Will they thrive in today's ecosystems or die out again? Should we keep them in a lab? That's no way to live. If we put them in a theme park, well, we all know how that went with Jurassic Park.